Hey, this is Nicholas, and we're talking about the hand tie-in lung channel. Now, when we start talking about the lung channel, or any channel for that matter, we want to start by discussing the normal functions and characteristics of the channel. Because once we know how a healthy, balanced lung channel is supposed to function, that will give us some insight into what happens when things go wrong. And it will also give us some insight into what the points on this channel can do, and when it's appropriate to choose those points for treatment. So let's start with Chapter 8 of the Xuân. This is the chapter of the Jing where every organ is assigned a government office. This is where we say the heart is the emperor, or the liver is the general. Well, here it says that the lung holds the office of prime minister and is the issuer of management and regulation. So what does this mean? First, when we say the lung is the prime minister, we mean that the lung is the prime minister to the heart. So the heart is the emperor and reigns over everything, but the lung is the one who is actually taking care of the day-to-day details. So this tells us that there's a strong relationship between the heart and the lung and the governing of the body's functions, and that's why they both sit right next to each other in the chest, in the upper jiao. Second, we say that the lung issues management and regulation. So what does the lung manage and regulate? Well, it manages and regulates the flow of qi and blood. This is a little bit strange, because normally we think of the heart pumping blood, or the liver governing free coursing through the vessels. But here we're saying that this management starts with the lung. Think of a Qigong practitioner. Qigong is essentially a set of breathing exercises. So by controlling the breath, the Qigong practitioner can control the flow of qi and guide the qi to specific parts of the body. So this is an example of how the lung can be used to regulate qi flow. Or, as another example, suppose a person is nervous or anxious. Their heart is pounding in their chest, their face turns red, and they start sweating. Well, this person can focus on their breath and regulate their breathing in order to calm themselves down, essentially using their lung to calm their heart shen. So when we start looking at point functions, we'll see examples of this relationship between the lung and the heart. Points on the lung channel can treat certain conditions such as heart pain, fullness in the chest, palpitation, mania and laughter, or an irregular pulse. So when we get into the actual functions of the lung, the first one we see is that the lung governs qi and controls respiration. The lung is a source of postnatal qi. It's where we get the da qi, the qi of the air. And then it also manages and regulates the flow of that qi throughout the body. Next, we look at the direction of the lung. On the one hand, the lung diffuses upward and outward, spreading the qi and supplying qi to the head and the face. On the other hand, it has a strong downward action. Unlike the spleen that raises the clear and descends the turbid, the lung is down-bearing the clear qi that we breathe in, hence the Wiseman term, depurative down-bearing. When the lung fails in its function of depurative down-bearing, the qi rebels upward, giving us symptoms like cough, wheezing, asthma, and shortness of breath. So these are situations where we would choose the lung channel for treatment. Next, the lung regulates the water passages. Remember, the kidney steams the fluid upward, and the lung percolates the fluids back down. When the lung fails to do its job, this water can stagnate. One possibility is phlegm formation, especially if this stagnant water combines with heat or cold. Another possibility is water retention or edema, especially in the upper limbs or the face. Or we can get urination problems, like frequent urination or bedwetting. So when we start looking at the functions of the points, we'll see that these points on the lung channel can treat these conditions by restoring the lung's ability to regulate the water passages. Next, we say the lung is responsible for the skin and the body hair. So if the lung is deficient, we may see a dry, dull, pale complexion. But what's especially useful is, when we say the lung governs the skin, we also mean it controls the opening and closing of the pores. So we can use points on the lung channel to regulate sweating and to release the exterior in the case of an external attack. Next, each of the organs opens to an orifice. So just like the kidney goes to the ears or the heart goes to the tongue, the lung opens to the nose. So, in our point functions, we're going to see that certain points along this channel are good for nasal congestion and sinus problems. Just a few other characteristics. We say the lung faces the 100 vessels. This again has to do with the lung's position as prime minister to the heart and its role of managing the flow of qi and blood. This is useful to us because we take the pulse at the wrist along the lung channel. It also lets us treat certain conditions of the pulse, like a weak pulse or an irregular pulse. It's also said, the lung is the delicate organ. Basically, whenever there's an attack, the lung is the first to be affected. Also, we might say certain things like the spleen is averse to cold or the stomach is averse to heat. Well, the lung is averse to everything. Heat, cold, dampness, dryness, wind. And then, just because the lung governs the exterior, it's going to be the first to get hit by any external pathogen. In terms of the 5 Shen, the lung houses the po, or the corporeal soul. This has to do with our sense of physicality, but clinically, what this means is we can use the lung to treat sadness and grief. So those are the functions of the lung, and understanding those functions is going to help us understand the functions of the points along this channel. Next, we can take a look at the actual pathways of the channel to get even more insight on what these points can do for us. So here's the primary channel, and here are a few points we want to pay attention to. Number 1, the lung starts with its internal pathway in the middle jiao. So if you ever get the question, where does the lung channel begin? Please do not say lung 1. The lung channel begins in the middle jiao. Second, we know that every channel connects to its own organ and its yin-yang pair via the internal pathway. So here we see the channel connecting to the lung and the large intestine. But what we want to pay attention to is if the channel connects to any additional organs. So here we see the lung channel traveling through the stomach organ. So this lets us know that we can select points on the lung channel to treat certain stomach conditions, such as nausea, vomiting, and acid reflux. Next, we see the channel making this nice diamond shape across the chest. So when we get to the point functions, we're going to see points that can treat things like fullness in the chest or heart pain, because this is where the channel pathway travels. And a really important one, the lung channel ascends to the throat. So the lung channel is going to be very important in treating things like sore throat or congestion. After that, the channel emerges and its external pathway goes down the radial side of the arm to the thumb. So we're able to treat conditions all along the pathway of that channel. And finally, we want to pay attention to this branch from lung 7 to the index finger. This is the path the qi takes to get to the next channel in the sequence of flow. So in the order of the qi flow, lung to large intestine to stomach to spleen, this is how the qi gets from the lung channel to the large intestine channel, through this branch. So here we have an overview of the pathologies of the lung. All of these should make sense. Cough, wheezing, and asthma because the lung controls respiration and has a descending action. Congested and sore throat because the channel ascends to the throat. Fullness in the chest because of that diamond pattern across the chest. And then we have just pain along the channel. Next is the low channel. Remember, low channels always start at their low connecting point. In this case, lung 7. Then here it spreads over the thenar eminence and connects to its yin-yang pair, the large intestine channel. So with the low connecting channel, we can treat pain along the course of the channel, in this case, thenar eminence pain, and we can also treat conditions of its yin-yang pair. So in this case, we can treat nasal congestion. Now, as we saw, the lung channel doesn't travel up to the nose. It stops at the throat and comes back down. But the reason we can treat nasal congestion is because the large intestine channel does go to the nose. So we're able to treat it at this point because it's the yin-yang pair. Next, we have the divergent channel. Remember the things we said about divergent channels. Number 1, they strengthen the relationship between yin and yang paired organs. So here we see the divergent channel connecting to the lung and the large intestine, strengthening this relationship. Number 2, they supply qi to the head and face. So again, we see the lung divergent channel going up to the throat, letting us treat things like sore throat. And 3, divergent channels reconnect to their yang paired channel. So the lung divergent channel emerges and connects to the large intestine channel, which again can help us treat nose problems because that's where the large intestine channel goes. So here's a summary, and as we can see, we have nasal congestion and throat problems, so those are things that can be treated by points along the lung channel. Next, we have the Sinew channel. Remember we said that Sinew channels do not connect to the organs, so that's why we don't see any organs in this picture. The Sinew channel generally follows the primary channel, so we can treat pain in the muscles and joints along its pathway. What's interesting to point out is the Sinew channel spreads over the ribs and the lateral costal region, so when we start looking at points, we'll see some of them are indicated for pain in the lateral costal region. We can treat that because of the pathway of the Sinew channel. So that's it for the channels. Again, the reason we spend so much time looking at these is because understanding the pathways of the channels will help us make sense of why the points do the things they do. So in order to understand the functions of the points, we're always going to relate it back to the normal physiology or functions of the channel, the pathways of the channel, or the category to which the point belongs. There are 361 points on the 14 channels, and if you try to memorize the function of every point, you're going to have a hard time. So instead, try to understand the organ, the channel pathways, and the point category in order to understand the functions of the points. Lung 1 is zhong, middle palate. The name is reminding us that the lung channel starts in the middle jiao, and that this point can be used to treat middle jiao problems. And it's also a front mu point. According to the classics, front mu points are used to treat yang conditions, that is, acute conditions, excess conditions, and heat. But in the modern clinic, we really just use them for any condition of the organ because that's where the qi of the organ accumulates. We should also point out that Xi-Cleft points can be used diagnostically because these points tend to get tender when there's a problem in the organ, so we can palpate lung 1 for tenderness to diagnose any problems with the lung. So here, lung 1 descends lung qi, activating the down-bearing function of the lung, treating symptoms of rebellious qi, like cough, wheezing, and asthma. It clears heat, treating heat in the chest. Remember with the internal pathway, we had that diamond-shaped pattern across the chest. It transforms phlegm to treat throat problems, and it's able to do that because the channel ascends to the throat. It treats nasal congestion because the lung opens to the nose, and it regulates the water passages, treating things like edema in the face. And finally, it descends stomach qi to treat nausea and vomiting because, like we said, this channel passes through the stomach organ. Lung 2 is honestly not that interesting. It descends lung qi, but most of the points here do that. It's on the shoulder, so it treats shoulder pain, but if anything stands out, we could say it's that it opens the chest and treats irregular pulse, highlighting that connection between the lung and the heart. Lung 3 is a window of heaven point. This one's a bit special because most window of heaven points are located on the neck, while lung 3 is located on the arm. But the lung channel goes to the throat, so it kind of makes sense that this could be a window of heaven point. Remember, these are the functions of window of heaven points, and all of them are represented here. Window of heaven points treat neck problems, and here we see lung 3 treats throat pain and goiter. Window of heaven points harmonize the flow of qi between the head and the body, treating rebellious qi, and we see that here with cough and hemoptysis. Window of heaven points treat disorders of the sense organs, and here lung 3 is treating dizziness and vision problems. And window of heaven points also treat psycho-emotional disorders, and here we see that with the function of calming the corporeal soul, treating things like sadness, grief, and shen problems. Lung 4 is another one that's just not very interesting. If a point doesn't have a category, it doesn't always do a whole lot. So it's on the arm, so it treats arm pain. And again, if anything stands out, it's this ability to open the chest. Lung 5, on the other hand, is a very important point. Chizhi means cubit marsh. It gets its name because it's located on the cubital crease. And you can think of it as a marsh because it's on a swampy part of the body. It's located in the elbow pit, where it tends to get hot and damp and sweaty, like a marsh. So this point is especially good at clearing heat and regulating water. So lung 5 clears heat, both excess heat and deficient heat. This can manifest as fever, dry mouth, or even certain bleeding conditions. If the heat goes into the chest, we can get chest pain and shen problems. Then lung 5 also regulates the water passages, treating things like edema, swelling of the limbs, and urination problems. Also, lung 5 is the He-Si point. Remember, He-Si points treat rebellious qi and diarrhea, and we see both of those here with cough, vomiting, and diarrhea. And finally, lung 5 is located on the elbow, so it's good for elbow pain, or pain anywhere else along the channel. Lung 6 is the Xi-Cleft point. Xi-Cleft points treat acute conditions and pain. So we see that here with things like throat pain, loss of voice, and pain along the channel. Xi-Cleft points on yin channels have an additional function of treating blood disorders. So here we see lung 6 clears heat to stop bleeding, treating things like hemoptysis and hematemesis, or vomiting of blood. The name of lung 7 is Lie Chui, meaning broken sequence. This is referring to its location and the fact that it's off the line, closer to the large intestine channel. This is a very important point, so let's look at its functions one by one. The lung governs the exterior and regulates the opening and closing of the pores. So here, lung 7 is one of our best points for releasing the exterior in cases of external attack, either wind heat or wind cold. Lung 7 not only treats external wind, but internal wind as well. In fact, this is why Ma Dan-yang named it one of his heavenly star points, because of its ability to treat things like headache, lockjaw, and wind obstruction in the upper body, for things like Bell's palsy and facial paralysis. It's also the Gao Wu command point for the head and nape, because it treats headache and neck disorders. Lung 7 is also the master point of the Ren channel. The Ren channel, or conception vessel, is one of the 8 extraordinary meridians. It runs up the anterior midline, and it connects to the uterus and the genitals. So that's why we see lung 7 treating conditions like uterine problems and genital problems. Lung 7 is also the Luo connecting point, giving this point some very important features. Remember the functions of the Luo connecting points. Number 1, they treat disorders of the yin-yang paired channel. So here we see lung 7 treating nasal congestion. Remember, the lung channel itself doesn't go up to the nose, it only goes as high as the throat. But its yin-yang pair, the large intestine channel, does go up to the nose. So that's why lung 7, the Luo point, is able to treat nasal congestion. Next, Luo connecting points treat disorders along the Luo connecting channel. So here we see pain in the wrist, thenar eminence, and thumb. And that's just the pathway of the Luo connecting channel that we talked about in the beginning. Luo connecting points also treat psycho-emotional disorders. So here we see things like poor memory, palpitations, laughter, again highlighting this connection between the lung and the heart. Lung 8 is Jing Chu, channel gutter. Honestly, this is not a very commonly used point. It's the Jing River point, and you would think this would be a big deal because Jing River points treat cough, shortness of breath, and fever and chills. But honestly, this point just isn't used very much in the modern clinic. If we wanted to release the exterior and treat these conditions, most people would just go to lung 7. Lung 9 is the Yuan source point. On yin channels, Yuan source points tonify the organ. So here, lung 9 tonifies the lung, both lung qi and lung yin. It's a Shu stream point, so it treats joint pain, and it's one of the 8 gathering points, or 8 Hui meeting points. It's the meeting point of the vessels, so it can treat certain heart conditions due to stagnation. Lung 10 is the Ying spring point and fire point on the lung channel, so this point is especially good for clearing heat. It's a very important point for benefiting the throat. Again, the lung channel ascends to the throat, so by clearing heat, we can treat sore throat, dry throat, or loss of voice. It also treats bleeding disorders due to heat, like coughing up blood or vomiting blood. Again, the lung channel connects to the stomach, so this point can also harmonize the stomach by clearing heat. And then the lung is the prime minister to the heart, so when there's heat in the lung, this heat tends to get transmitted into the heart, causing agitation and Shen problems. So by clearing heat from the lung, we can also clear heat from the heart to treat these Shen problems. Lung 11 is the Jing well point. The well points are superficial and have a quick effect, so this point is able to restore consciousness. Well points clear heat and treat the opposite end of the channel, so lung 11 can treat acute disorders of the throat due to severe heat or fire toxicity. This point you would usually prick to bleed, so I would only use it for severe throat problems. For anything else, I would probably prefer to go to lung 10 to benefit the throat. Jing well points also treat fullness below the heart, so here we see that with lung 11 treating fullness below the heart. And then also, lung 11 is a sun sum yao ghost point, so it's used to treat mania and epilepsy. This is probably due to the fact that this point can strongly clear heat, and also because the lung has such a close relationship to the heart, so it's able to quickly calm severe Shen problems. So that's it for the lung channel. Hopefully that wasn't too complicated. Just remember to focus on your channel pathways and point categories, and then we'll see you next time.